Hello, my name is Leanna Richardson.
I'm Angela Macias.
And we will be performing a scene from Lettice and Loveage.
Mrs. Berry. Good afternoon. Please take a seat. I hope you had tons of internet from London.
Well, that is not very likely, is it, considering one is about to be arraigned?
I'm sorry.
I'm at the bar of judgment, am I not?
Yes, your position is to be reviewed, actually. I'm sure you see the inevitability in that. I have no choice in the matter.
Like the headsman.
I'm sorry?
The headsman always asks for forgiveness of those who is about to decapitate.
I'd appreciate it if you left historical analogies out of this conversation, Mr. Bay.
As you please.
It is solely to do with your job and your fitness to perform it. We both know what we have to talk about. As an official of the department over to praise you, I cannot possibly overlook what I witnessed yesterday afternoon. I cannot understand it, and I cannot possibly condone it. Do you have anything to say in extenuation?
It is not my fault.
I'm sorry?
Except in the most limited sense of the word.
Then whose is it?
I respect accuracy in recounting history when it is moving and startling. Then I wouldn't dream of altering a single detail.
Yes, that's gracious of you.
However, in some cases I do feel the need to take a hand. I discovered this evil working at Fusting House over the summer. It's wholly the fault of the house that I yielded to it.
Of the house?
Yes.
You are actually blaming the house for your grotesque narrations.
I am, most definitely. Fusting House is quite simply the dullest house in England. If it has any rival in that category, I have yet to discover it. Nothing would ever happen to it. It's impossible to make interesting. A girl almost fell down the stairs, but didn't. A queen? She did fall, but it wasn't even downstairs. It survived to be honored by the poor. How am I expected to make anything out of that?
You're not expected to make anything out of the house, Mr. Fay, merely to show people around it.
I'm afraid I can't agree. I am there to enlighten them. That, first of all.
Enlighten.
Light them up. Enlarge, enliven, enlighten. My mother's watchwords. She called them the 3 E's. She was a great instructor, my mother.
Really? At what institution?
The oldest and the best. The theater. All good actors are instructors, as I'm sure you realize.
I'm afraid I don't at all.
But certainly, their subjects are us, their sources are themselves. Again, my mother's phrase. She ran a touring company of players, all trained to speak Shakespeare thrillingly in the French.
The French?
Yes. She moved to France after the war, able to find employment in her native England equivalent of that in the Dordogne. It's not very appreciative of Shakespeare.
The French peasantry is hardly noted for that kind of enthusiasm.
Nor the intellectuals either. Voltaire called Shakespeare barbarian. Did you know that? Barbarian!
The Gaelic mind imagines it in civilization.
My mother set out to correct that impression. She called her company in pure defiance, Les Barbets.
She was evidently not free to challenge. So.
Never. Every girl was trained to phrase faultlessly.
And every man.
There were no men.
It was an all-female company.
Indeed. My mother married a free French soldier called Buffet, who abandoned her within 3 months of the wedding. She had no pleasure thereafter associating with French men. They're all fickle, she used to say, fickle and furtive.
Fair description of the whole nation, I would say.
She raised me up entirely on her own, mainly on the road. We performed all over the Dordogne and farmhouses and barns, wherever they would have us. We only performed the history plays of Shakespeare, because history was my mother's passion. I was the stage manager in charge of costume, props, and sword fights. Fights, I may say, as ferocious as they can be, enacted by a horde of gallant girls in their armor when their dander is really up. She herself was known for King Richard III. She wore a pillow on her back as a hump. It was brilliantly effective. No one who heard her will ever forget the climax of her performance, the cry of total despair that wrung from her on the battlefield. Uncheval! 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 All translations were her own.
A remarkable achievement.
Not for her. Language was her other passion. Growing up, I was never permitted to read anything but the grandest prose. Language alone frees on, she used to say, and history gives one place. She was adamant I didn't lose my English heritage, either in words or deeds. So every night, she enacted for me a story of our country's past, fleshing it out in her own marvelous virtuosity. richest battlefield of Bosworth, with a golden crown hung in a thorn bush. King Charles I marched into his beheading like a ramrod on a freezing January morning. West. If he trembled from fear, his enemies would say it was from cold. Wonderful. On a child's mind, the most tremendous events are engraved like a diamond on a window pane. To me, my tourists, simply random holidaymakers in my care for 20 minutes of their lives, are my children in this respect. I am there to enlarge them. Enlarge, enliven, enlighten them.
With fantasies.
Fantasy floods in where fact leaves a vacuum.
Another saying of your mother's.
My own. When I first started working at Fustian House, I spoke nothing but fact. Exactly what was set before me in all its glittering excitement. By the time I had finished, I would have turned gray with indifference. My whole group would have turned gray every afternoon. Fustian House is a haunted house, was shown, founded by the spirit of novelty of nothing ever happening. It had to be bought.
With untruth.
With anything.
With untruth.
I am the daughter of Alice Evans Dufay, dedicated to lighting up the world, not dousing in a dust. My tongue could not simply go on speaking that stuff. No doubt it was excessive. I got carried, I can't deny. Further and further from the shore, back up the slipstream of fiction. But blame the house of the spirit which to fight it.
And this is your defense?
The people once left yawning, they now leave admiring. I use that word in its strict old sense, meaning a state of wonder. This is no mean defense.
That's completely irrelevant.
Last month, I put a soup bowl out by the rear exit. Not from greed, though. Heavens knows what could be forgiven for that with what you pay me. I wanted proof. People express their gratitude the same all over the world with their money. My soup bowl brims. It brims every evening with their coins, as they themselves are brimming people. I watch as they walk away toward the car park afterwards, and those are brimming people. Every one.
So if you would look through these letters, Mr. Bay, we discover that quite a few of them are not actually brimming except for the invitation.
Trails are always among us. Curmudgeons are never slow to come forward.
22 letters, Mr. Bay. I have 22 letters about you.
22? What's that? I have 50.
Please, Mr. Bay, please.
Look, read.
Please,
Here,
Mr.
for
Bay.
yourself.
Please, I will not.
Alive. Please, read.
Please, Mr. Bay, this is my desk. Please. Complete nonsense, all of it. Child, your car park, your mother. I don't care. I am not in the entertainment business, and neither are you. You're running a heritage, not running a field. That is all.
Hi, I'm Casey Bonstein,
And I'm Laura Chavez,
and we will be performing a scene from Lettice and Loveage, in which I will be playing Lettice.
and I will be playing Loveage.
Oh, Miss Dufay. Please sit. I hope you had a pleasant journey over from London.
It's not very likely, is it, considering what is about to be arranged?
I'm sorry.
I'm at the bar of judgment, am I not?
Your position is to be reviewed, actually. I'm sure you see that I'm privileged with that. I have no say in such matters.
Like the headsman.
I'm sorry.
The headsman always asks forgiveness of those he was about to decapitate.
I'd appreciate it if you kept historical analogies out of this conversation, Mr. Fair.
As you please.
After all, it is solely to do with your job and your fitness to perform it. We both know what we have to talk about. As an official of the house which employs you, I cannot possibly overlook what I witnessed here. I cannot understand it, nor can I possibly condone it. Do you have anything to say in extenuation?
It is not my fault,
I'm sorry.
except in a most limited sense of that word.
Then whose fault is it?
I respect accuracy in recounting history when it is moving and startling. Then I wouldn't dream of altering a single detail.
That is gracious of you.
However, I do confess I felt the need to take a hand. I discovered this need working at Fustian House over the summer, and it is wholly the fault of that house that I yielded to it.
You are actually blaming the house for your grotesque narrations?
I am, most definitely. Fustian is quite honestly the dullest house in all of London, and if it has any rival in that category, I have yet to discover it. It is actually quite impossible to make interesting. Over 400 years and nothing whatsoever happened in it. A queen almost fell downstairs, but she didn't. A girl did fall, not even downstairs, but she survived to be honored by the poor. So out of that?
You are not expected to make anything out of the house, Miss Duque, merely to show people around it.
I'm afraid I can't agree. I'm there to enlighten them. That first of all.
Enlighten?
Yes, light them up. Enlarge, enliven, enlighten. That was my mother's watchword, actually. She called them the 3 E's. She was a great teacher, my mother.
Really? Not what institution?
Oh, the oldest and the best. The theater. All good actors are instructors, as I'm sure you realize.
I'm afraid I don't know.
Oh, but certainly. Their sources are us and their subjects are themselves. Again, my mother's phrase. She ran a touring company of players, all trained by her to speak Shakespeare thrillingly in the French tongue.
French?
Yes. She moved to France after the war, unable to find employment in her native England equal to that of the Bordeaux. Was not really very appreciative of Shakespeare.
As a French peasant who is hardly noted for that kind of enthusiasm.
Oh, nor the intellectuals. I mean, Voltaire called Shakespeare barbare. Did you know that? Barbarian.
I'm not surprised. The Gaelic might seem to be gaining civilization.
Well, my mother set out to correct that impression. Her company was called in pure defiance, Les Barbères.
She was evidently not afraid of challenge, was she?
Never. Every girl was trained by her to phrase faultlessly.
And every man to present?
There were no men. My mother married a free French soldier in London by the name of Dufay, and he abandoned her within 3 months of the wedding. She had no pleasure thereafter in associating with Frenchmen. They are all fickle, she would say, fickle and furtive.
A fair description of the whole nation, I would say.
My mother brought me up entirely on her own. Yes, mainly on the road. We performed in farmhouses and in barns, anywhere they would have us. Mostly the historical plays of Shakespeare because history was my mother's passion. And I was the stage manager, responsible for costumes and props. Fights. Sword fights, I might add, that are only as ferocious as they can be, enacted by a horde of gallant girls in armor when their dander is really up. She herself was famous for her King Richard III, and she wore a pillow on her back as a hump. It was brilliantly effective. Anyone who saw her performance would never forget the climax, the cry of total despair that rung out on the battlefield. Un cheval, man royal pour un cheval. All the translations were her own.
A remarkable achievement.
Oh, not for her. Language. Language was her other passion. You see, as I grew up, I was never permitted to read anything but the grandest prose. Language alone frees on, she would say, and history gives one place. She was adamant I shouldn't lose my English heritage in either words or deeds, so she enacted a story for me every night, fleshing it out with her own marvelous virtuosity. Richard's battlefield of Bosworth, the golden crown hung up in the thorn bush. King Charles I marching to his beheading like a ramrod on a freezing January morning, wearing 2 shirts of snowy white linen, lest if he trembled from fear, his enemies would say it was from the cold. Wonderful. In a child's mind, the most tremendous events engraved is a diamond on a window pane. And to me, my tourists, simply random holiday makers in my care for 20 minutes of their lives, are my children in this respect. It is my duty to enlarge them. To enlarge, enliven, and enlighten them.
With fantasies?
Well, fantasy floods in where fact leaves a vacuum.
Another saying of your mother's?
My own. Miss Schoen, when I first arrived at Fustian House, I spoke nothing but fact. Everything that was laid out before me in all of its glittering excitement. But every afternoon, my entire group would have turned gray with indifference, and I myself would have turned gray as well. Fustian is a haunted house, Miss Schoen. It's haunted by the spirit of nullity, of nothing ever happening. It had to be fought.
With untruth.
With anything.
With untruth.
I am the daughter of Alice Evans Dufay, dedicated to lighting up the world, not dousing it in dust. And my tongue could simply not go on speaking this stuff.
And
I'll admit.
Defense?
Oh, you see, I'll admit that I was carried further and further from the shore of fact down the slipstream of fiction, but you can't blame the spirit which defied it. Blame the house.
And this is your defense?
Repeat they now leave admiring. I use that word in its strict old sense, meaning a state of wonder, and that is no mean defense.
It is completely irrelevant.
Last month, I put a soup bowl out by the rear exit, not from greed, though heaven knows I could be forgiven with what you pay me. I wanted proof. People express their gratitude the same way all over the world. And my soup bowl brims. It brims every evening with their coins as they themselves are brimming people. And I watch them walk away to the car park afterwards, and those are brimming people, every one.
Really, if you were to look through these letters, you would see that they're not exactly brimming, except with indignation.
Churls are always with us, and curmudgeons are never slow to come forward.
22 letters, Miss Dufay. I have 22 letters about you, none of them exactly written in a state of wonder.
You see, 22. What is that? I have 50. No, look, I have
Please, Miss Dufay, this is my desk.
This is the...
Enough! I don't care. None of it matters. Your childhood, your car park, your mother, none of it matters. We are not in the entertainment business, and nor are you. We are not running a theater. We are trying to guard a heritage. That is all.